This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Down goes Illinois, the first seed out of the NCAA tournament, knocked off by Loyola Chicago and Sister Jean. What a performance. All of you that have been paying attention to March Madness for a long time, you know this theme music. When it comes on, it gets you hyped. This is the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, as always, Kayvon, and what a tournament we've had so far. Round 2 is underway. I'm coming at you guys live on a Sunday here, so round 2 is officially underway, and we already have one number 1 seed out of here. Illinois, who, to much of my dismay, is officially eliminated by Loyola Chicago. Loyola Chicago, this is a similar spot for them. They've done this before. It was only a couple years ago in 2018 where Porter Moser, head coach of Loyola Chicago, took his team on a Cinderella Final Four run. So they were not scared. They were not intimidated. You could see that from the opening tip. They went wire to wire, ladies and gentlemen. They didn't just beat Illinois, they dominated them. In the coaching aspect, in the playing aspect, they won this game wire to wire. And as I say, to much of my dismay, I picked Illinois to win it all. So already my team is out of it. I'm very disappointed because I was doing so well with my brackets. I was winning every single pool that I was in until this happened. I picked a lot of upsets that were right. I picked Syracuse over San Diego State. I picked UCLA, North Texas. Some of these schools I predicted, and then Illinois comes out here and completely lays an egg. And, I really am going to put a lot of this on Brad Underwood, Illinois' head coach, as well as Illinois' star player, Ayu Dosunmu. They both, first of all, Ayu was just off. He had a bad game. And that happens with players. I didn't see that happening with him. He is such a talented player. I haven't seen him have this type of game in a long time. He went out there. He had almost as many turnovers as he did points. 9.6 turnovers. 4 for 10 shooting from the field in 38 minutes. I mean, it was a horrible day for Ayu. There's just no other way to put that. But Brad Underwood, the head coach of Illinois, did not help him out much, and we're going to get into this, but Porter Moser, the head coach of Loyola, he completely outcoached Illinois. He completely outcoached Brad Underwood, and the better team today won. Illinois was the better team all season. Loyola was the better team today. They showed that. They proved that, and the Sister Jean magic fights on as they try and make another Final Four run in as many as 2 years, which is pretty remarkable. It really is for what Porter Moser is now turning into somewhat of a powerhouse program. I mean, sounds crazy to say that with Loyola Chicago, but again, this isn't even a shock to them because they've done it before. So congrats to Loyola. We're going to get into all of this. Once again, you're listening to the GSMC Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Kayvon. We've already have a 1 seed down and a 2 seed down. We've got a 3 seed in Texas down. there is, I think there was a total of, I think I'm right. I think there was a total of 11 upsets in the first and second round. Now with the second round happening with Illinois being the first team to be upset in this second round. Loyola Chicago is the first team to advance to the Sweet 16. Baylor just finished their game against Wisconsin. Boy, does Baylor look good. I'll tell you what, Baylor is one of those teams where the longer they stay in this tournament, the more dangerous they become. Because the reason I didn't pick Baylor is because they were off a long COVID pause. And once they came back from that COVID pause, they did not look like that same old Baylor team. But I'll tell you what, as the longer they get to play, the longer they get to practice, they could end up winning this tournament because they were one of the best teams all year round. They just got themselves out of rhythm a little bit. So they're playing. Syracuse is up against West Virginia, but it's been upset central. I think it's the second most upsets in the first round that we've ever had in a tournament, which is wild. But that's what makes March Madness March Madness. That is the secret sauce of why this is such a popular event, because it's unpredictable. Because you can go out there and say, hey, boys, hey, girls, I'm going to bet North Texas to beat Purdue. And no one can look at you crazy because it genuinely can happen any day because it's a 48-minute game. It's not a best of 3. It's not a best of 7. It's a one game. You win, you move on. You have a bad night, it's over. You get hot, you keep winning. That's how it is. So we're going to get into all that, but I want to open up the show here with a little bit more serious news. And that's a couple of topics here that happen within the NCAA, and then we'll really dive into the bracket, the upsets, what the teams are right now that are looking like the best teams to win it all now that Illinois is out. Gonzaga looks awesome. We'll dive into all that as well as some NFL free agency stuff and some NBA stuff as LeBron James has a high ankle sprain and is out indefinitely. Big news here for the Lakers. That is not good news. AD is already out. Now you add on LeBron James. I hope he's okay. I pray he's okay. We'll see how long he's out. But that is not good if you are a Lakers fan. That is for sure, especially with how tight and highly contested that West division is. But I want to first get into this, and this was a very popular story and still is with the start of the NCAA. And if you have been following along, or honestly, if you just haven't been under a rock the last couple of days, you have heard this story, and that was the mismanagement by the NCAA to what they did with giving the men's tournament much more weights and accessibility to working out than they did with the women's tournament. If you haven't seen what I'm talking about, go and look it up, okay? Just go on Twitter, go on Google, type in men's and women's weight room issues, and you will see what I'm talking about. But a quick little synopsis for you guys. The NCAA gave the men's a massive area with a bunch of different weights and dumbbells and bench press and squats, all these different equipment and big area to work out, while they gave the women one rack of dumbbells that I think went as high as 25. I don't think they had bigger dumbbells than a pair of 25s, and it was one tiny little rack. And this caught fire on Twitter. Thank God, the women stood up, they tweeted about it, and it caught fire. Everyone from former men and women NCAA players to professional basketball players to professional football players to celebrities, you name it, people were commenting and talking about this. It was grabbing a bunch of attention, and rightfully so. So how did this happen? So I just want to talk about this. All right, the NCAA men's and women's tournament are all under the same umbrella. And whatever was ordered for the men and was there for the men should have been there for the women as well. That seems beyond reasonable, right? To me, that seems totally reasonable. To me, though, what was extraordinarily troubling was the response that we saw once this started to blow up. It was all over social media. Members of the women's tournament were posting about it. Professional athletes were talking about it. I mean, it was getting a ton of attention. And this is the problem with the NCAA. This is what I personally have been saying on air in this same microphone where I'm sitting in this exact chair for many years now about the NCAA, and that's their lack of leadership. Mark Emmert, who is the president of the NCAA, was nowhere to be found when the issue was being discussed. And that's what was extremely troubling in my mind. Again, this was blowing up. Everyone was talking about it, and we heard nothing from the NCAA for a long period of time. Mark Emmert then let Lynn Holtzman, who is the vice president of women's basketball, to step forward and take all the flack on this. She was the one that had to step up and call a press conference and talk about it. And you could tell, if you haven't seen that, go look up her press conference. You could tell from the emotional response of Lynn Holtzman how devastating this was to her. The NCAA once again showed zero leadership, and sadly I can't say I'm surprised. Everyone that has followed the NCAA for as long as I have, and all of you that have followed it for even longer, you most likely weren't surprised either. The first thing Mark Emmert should have done was step up immediately. Not 24 hours later, not 36 hours later, not after it got blown up on social media and all over Twitter. No, immediately he should have stepped up and said, you know what? This is on me. I made a mistake. This was an operational error. I will fix this right away. This was on me. That's what he should have done. That's the first thing that should have happened with the president of the NCAA. Right? When you are a president, a CEO of a company, that you're a big dog, right? You're in the biggest possible shoes that you can be in. So to that type of responsibility, you have to be able to own up when things do not go right, even if it wasn't your call. He should have been out front and should have said, this is unacceptable. It is on me. I'm the president of the organization. I am the responsible leader here, and we apologize and we will fix this. But that's not what happened. He was nowhere to be found. He didn't speak for over 24 hours after this. And the only reason he even said something in the first place was because a reporter literally bumped into him in a hallway in an NCAA arena where a game was going on. And he didn't even, and the reporter, very talented, good job by the reporter, asked him about the details of this, and he didn't really know all the details. He didn't even know the full situation of what was going on and all of the details and such. It's a complete failure of leadership, and there you can understand why we have these systemic issues within the NCAA. Right? And this, the sad thing is, this is not the first time. And I want to stand up here and be optimistic and say, well, hopefully it's the last, hopefully they've learned, but I highly doubt that. What evidence have we received to tell us that this is the last time something like this will happen? We haven't seen anything. But even though I wasn't shocked, I still can be disappointed. And I was deeply disappointed when I saw it. I mean, the whole thing, the whole push has been for equality, and here you have the men's and women's tournaments, and it would be pretty simple to make sure that whatever you're ordering for the men, that you're ordering for the women as well. And to not get a quick response from Mark Emmert after this mistake happened, this was the NCAA's chance to do right, to show in the public eye they are working on getting their act together. And they completely dropped the ball. They just can't seem to get themselves out of their own way. I mean, just when we are getting ready to celebrate, think about this, celebrate something here with the NCAA tournament that back in June and July, people wondered if we were even going to have a tournament to begin with. Instead of celebrating the coaches and the players and the great victories that we've had and the amount of upsets that we've had, instead we're sitting here, I'm opening up my sports show talking about this instead of the games. The NCAA just can't seem to get out of their own way. It's mind-boggling to me. Now, I do want to say this, okay? Because I have seen a lot of people come out and say, what makes you think the NCAA would do this maliciously? Right? That there's no evidence to state they did this on purpose. And you know what? That's correct. If you want to argue that, then fine, go ahead. I'll let you have that. We have a pandemic going on, and putting on an NCAA tournament in a normal year is hard enough, right? So you think about it with the tournament, they've got a lot going on. I get that. And I'm not standing up here saying that the NCAA did do this maliciously. I'm not saying that. This could have 1,000% been an operational error. But what there is absolutely zero excuse for is it took over 24 hours for someone from the NCAA to even comment on the situation. The situation is blowing up left and right. It takes over 24 hours for someone to comment on it. No one's taking responsibility. The president has nothing to do with it. The only reason the president talked in the first place is because a reporter literally ran into him, and without full preparation, knowing what's happening, getting a real answer, he wasn't even fully aware of the situation. There is no excuse for that. There is no answer to that other than complete lack of leadership, complete lack of awareness, unwilling to take responsibility, all things that Mark Emmert and the NCAA has lacked for years and years. And again, while I want to sit up here and say, hopefully they'll learn from it, and it's their last time doing something like this, and I hope so. It's really hard to believe that because of the countless times of misjudgment, the countless times of zero leadership and responsibility. There is no leadership within the NCAA, and that's why there are so many issues that happen like this. This is the GSMC Sports Podcast. I am your host, Kayvon Izami. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to dive into one other thing that happened within the games. Now, this is more of something that happened with, not exactly on the basketball court, but something that happened within the games with Tom Izzo and one of his players. I want to talk about that real quick. It happened on Thursday night, so just give you guys my thoughts and takes on that, and then we'll dive into some real basketball going on. We'll dive into the Lakers situation. Illinois lost, Loyola Chicago. Can they go on another Cinderella run to the Final Four? All of that coming up next. Don't go anywhere. This is the GSMC Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Kayvon Izami. We'll be right back after this.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. This is the GSMC Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Kayvon Izami. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this show. We are entering segment number 2 here. Sunday, as this is being recorded, Illinois has already lost. Loyola Chicago, the 8 seed, is moving on to take on the winner of Oklahoma State with Cade Cunningham and the extremely hot Oregon State Beavers right now. My goodness, are they ever going to cool off? Remember, Oregon State, the only reason they were in the tournament is because they won their Pac-12. They did not have a good regular season tournament, so they had to win the Pac-12 tournament to make it. They did. They went on a hot streak, won those 4 games in a row, or I think it was 5 games in a row. Then they kept that going in the opening round as they beat Tennessee, who I thought is a really good team. I mean, Tennessee had a great season, one of the best teams in the SEC, and Oregon State they didn't just beat them, they clobbered them. They were up by 20 almost the entire game, and that's because of how well they're shooting that 3 ball. They're shooting over 40% from behind the arc in every single game. And if that keeps up, they'll keep winning, but I don't know how long that can keep up. Eventually, you're going to cool off from behind the arc, and I think Cade Cunningham, is the undisputed number 1 draft pick in the NBA coming up this year. The guy's an absolute stud. He's an all-around game player. He can put the ball on the ground. He can shoot the 3. He's tall enough, great with the ball in terms of rebounding. He's a good passer. He is an all-around player, and Oklahoma State has a good team. So I think they end up ending that Oregon State run, and then it will be a fantastic matchup, Oklahoma State and Loyola Chicago in the Sweet 16. We've got Syracuse right now up 7. Syracuse, man, and Jim Boeheim. I swear every year they squeak into the tournament, but once they get in there, boy, you do not want to see them because they just win games. They win games. And the reason why they win games is if you're not familiar with playing Syracuse on a normal basis, like all the other like the teams in the ACC that play them twice a year, sometimes, once, twice a year, whatever, it's hard to play them in a 1-game sample size because of the zone they play. Syracuse plays one of the most unique zones in basketball. I mean, it is just a fascinating type of defense that they play, and if you're not used to that type of defense and your players who are college kids, let's remember that, if they're not used to those types of looks on defense, it's really hard in a span of 48 minutes to adjust and learn that zone. Pretty much the way to beat the zone is by knocking down your outside shots. You've got to knock down your 3s. You've got to knock down your outside shots so that you can kind of fluster the zone and get them out of their way. Because what the zone does is they'll trap you into thinking there's no open passing lanes, and it really will start to confuse you. And again, these are high school players, 18, 19-year-old players that when you don't see a zone like that every day, it's really hard to adjust. And even though your coach probably knows how to adjust against it, or your coach has played against it before, the players still haven't. So that's something tough, and you could tell that was an issue in the first round with San Diego State. They were not prepared for that type of zone, and Buddy Boeheim, Jim Boeheim's son, was lights out from behind the arc, and right now he and Syracuse is lights out from behind the arc to start this game. But West Virginia's starting to come back. We'll see what happens there. So a lot of great things going on. Again, a ton of upsets. A ton of upsets in the first round. Abilene Christian upsets Texas. I mean, Shaka Smart and the 3-seed Texas, who just a week ago won the entire Big 12 tournament by beating Oklahoma State in the finals. They are a 3-seed and they go home. You've got 4-seed Virginia. They go home early to Ohio. That was a really common upset pick, and that ended up working out. You had North Texas beat Purdue. Purdue is usually a really good tournament team, but they lost right away. And then obviously the biggest upset before today was Oral Roberts beating Ohio State. Ohio State, I watched that game. They just played terrible. They couldn't buy a bucket. And Oral Roberts said, you know what? We're the 15 seed. We know we're unmatched. We know we're undermanned. So what we're going to do is we're going to chuck up a crap ton of 3s. And if they go in, we have a chance to win this game. And that's what they did. They just launched from behind the arc all game. And boy, did they win. Boy, did they show up. And they They surprised Ohio State, and that was the biggest upset until today, when Porter Moser, Loyola Chicago head coach, once again goes on a big upset and has his team heading for another Cinderella story as they enter the Sweet 16 as the 8th seed after knocking off what I thought was the second best team in this tournament and going to win it all in Illinois. I thought Illinois was playing fantastic basketball coming into it. They won the Big Ten tournament. They had the most Quad 1 wins. What are Quad 1 wins for you guys that don't know? Quad 1 wins are top of the line wins, like the best teams. The Illinois had the most wins against the best teams in the country all year long. So I thought they were prepared by playing some of the best teams. They were not just playing those teams, but they were beating those teams. I thought, okay, they'll be able to handle it, but they had an off night, and that's what makes the tournament so great. You have one off night, and the other team plays well, boom. You're in trouble. And that's what's happened to Illinois. So lots to get into there. Before we do that, though, I do want to dive into what happened on Thursday night. And I know this is a little bit of ways since then, but I do want to discuss it. This is my first time being on air since this happened, so bear with me here. Maybe I have a different take than you guys have heard. For those that, again, have been under a rock and did not see this situation, what happened on Thursday night in the Michigan State-UCLA game, Michigan State lost to UCLA. This was a play-in game, remember? 4 games happened the night before the tournament to see who gets the last 4 spots in the actual tournament. So these were play-in games, and during that game, UCLA won in overtime. Michigan State had a big lead. UCLA came back, won, and then they ended up beating BYU last night too. So they're on a little bit of a roll right now. But during that game, Michigan State, as I'm sure we're all aware of this now, head coach of Michigan State, longtime Hall of Fame head coach Tom Izzo, was seen on camera getting in an argument with one of his players. If you haven't seen it, go look it up while you're listening to this, or hit the pause button, go look it up on YouTube or Google, come back and listen to my thoughts of it, because I want you to get a good idea of what happened. So you have a good idea why I'm talking about it. But I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have already seen this. Now, this is not the first time something like this has happened with Tom Izzo. He is an old school, tough-nosed head coach, right? That's how he coaches. Now, it's 2021, so whenever an incident like this happens, it obviously blows up. And you have people on both sides, some that think this is not appropriate and coaches shouldn't coach this way anymore, and others who don't mind it. I personally don't mind this at all. I don't think Tom Izzo did anything wrong whatsoever. So I was sitting there thinking about the situation, right, and trying to decide how I wanted to attack this, because in real time I knew this was going to be a big topic. I thought there was nothing wrong with it, but that's just how it is today with the way media is and how enlarged it is and how everyone can see things, so clearly and quickly. I really wanted to think about it. And I thought, okay, if I'm sitting in the stands and my son is playing for Tom Izzo at Michigan State, and I saw this happen, would I be okay with it? How would I feel as a dad watching this? And my answer would be yes, I would be okay with it. Depending on the level of trust I have for my son's coach. That's the key right there, okay? That is the key. For example, if this was youth league or church league or something like that, and the coach is grabbing my son like that, I don't know how I would feel about that. That's a different situation. But this is college, and the thing about college is the student picks where he wants to go. In this instance, the student athlete's name is Gabe Brown. Now, I work in recruiting for my day job, so I understand how recruiting works really well. So we have to understand this. Gabe Brown, the student athlete, picked to go to Michigan State, right? That was his choice. That's the luxury of college sports and scholarships. You get to pick where you want to go. Him and his family decided going to play for Coach Izzo was the best thing for him, for Gabe. Now, Gabe is from Michigan, okay? So he obviously knows who Tom Izzo is and how Tom Izzo coaches. Right? He clearly knows that Tom Izzo is a tough, old-school coach. I mean, he is from Michigan. So does the family. Like, you know who Tom Izzo is. You've known this for decades. If you're a Michigan State fan and a family member, or you've sent your child to Michigan State, you know how he responds to disrespect. He commands attention. That's what Tom Izzo does. And I guess the bigger question is, when we send our kids off to college, especially when they're in a competitive environment like sports, it's a little bit different, right? It's not like we're sending our kids off to college and, it's just, we know that they're going into just regular class. They're just a student. When we send our kids off to college, in some ways we're entrusting their teachers and more importantly their coaches to be surrogates for what you were as at home for them, right? As a parent, I mean, think about that. That's kind of what we're doing. I take that even as a just sending them as a normal student for their teachers to do that, and then especially as a student athlete when you're seeing this coach every single day. And I think especially with sports, if you know what to expect from that guy, from that coach, that's what you're going to get, right? Some kids, and some kids can't handle that type of negative reinforcement. So some kids can't, and that's totally fine. And so they're probably better off going to a school with a more player-friendly coach who has maybe a softer approach, a different approach than what a coach like Tom Izzo has. And that coach, is going to sit you down and put his arm around you and say, hey, look, this is what you got to do better. This is what you have to change. But if you're sending your kid to Michigan State and Coach Izzo is the coach, going into that, this is how Tom Izzo coaches. You know that. And if you disrespect him or not listening to him, or if you're screaming back at him like this kid Gabe Brown was, it's going to get a little aggressive. And I think Gabe honestly needed that. And I think Tom Izzo is not shy to perform what he thinks these kids need. And honestly, I don't even know if negative reinforcement was the right word. I don't even know if that was what this was. It honestly, to me, seemed more like just Gabe Brown wasn't respecting authority. I mean, he was screaming at Tom Izzo, and Tom Izzo was letting him know how he felt back. And we saw after the game, former Michigan State players like Draymond Green come out and say, this is how it is at Michigan State. We understand that. We are aware of that. Don't make this something that it's not, right? This is how it is. We know how it is. Don't make this something that it's not. And another note that I think is important here, Tom Izzo recruits different types of players. He very rarely recruits the one-and-done type of player, like John Calipari does at Kentucky, or Coach K does at Duke. He doesn't really recruit that, where they just come for a year and then they leave for the NBA. No, most of the kids he recruits are there for 3-4 years. That's just kind of how he does it. It's more of a all-in mentality. The point what I'm saying is from the moment you are identified as a potential Michigan State player, you are believed to be tough enough, whether that's physically or mentally, to handle that type of coaching and authority and everything that comes with it. Whether the cameras are on during the NCAA tournament or during the NCAA tournament or game, or in practice when there are no cameras. when nobody's watching. And think about this. If that happens a couple times during a game, which it has in the last 2 years, or in the last 2 tournaments, or I think it was this tournament and then 2 years ago it happened again, I'm quite sure it happens at times behind closed doors as well, when there's no cameras around. And I'm okay with that, because when you sign up to play for Tom Izzo, you know what you're getting. That's the whole point here. This isn't like Izzo is a new school coach and takes a different method, and then out of the blue, he has this outburst and altercation with a player like that. No. This is Tom Izzo. This is a Hall of Fame coach. You understand how he coaches. Now, whenever Tom Izzo retires and a new coach comes in, if he is very different, he won't necessarily be able to get away with that. But Izzo can completely get away with it, because at the end of the day, the parents and the family members that are connected to the student athletes on that team, they know who Tom Izzo is. And they know that he cares more about them, those young men, than he does about anything else, like the fame or his contract or whatever. Because at the end of the day, and I've said this before, character doesn't go away, right? Tom Izzo always has character. He is consistent. Win or lose, he has always been consistent with how he coaches young men. And that is why I am totally fine with how all that went down. Because at the end of the day, Izzo was just trying to teach the kid. He was trying to grab the kid's attention in a critical moment, a teaching moment. And by the way, I have absolutely no issue as well with the reporter asking him about the incident after the game. Totally fine with that. That is the media's job. So while Tom Izzo answered the question, he did let the media know he wasn't very happy with the question. So that is where I will disagree with Izzo. That's the media's job. And frankly, it would have been irresponsible for a reporter not to ask about it, just to get a good idea of what was the altercation about, why it happened, etc. And Izzo answered to his credit, he answered the question very well, in my opinion. You could tell he was disgruntled about it. He didn't really like it. But that's the media's job. So that's the one part where I would disagree with Izzo. But everything else, I'm perfectly fine with. Because that's just what. Now, obviously, there's boundaries. Like just because Tom Izzo is a tough-nosed coach, he can't go and back in the Bobby Knight days and throw a chair at a kid or slap a kid or punch a kid or something. I mean, obviously there's boundaries. Like just because this is who Tom Izzo is and the family knows that doesn't mean he can go all berserk and crazy. No, this was nothing though. This was nothing. He was trying to grab the kid's attention. The kid was screaming at him, so he raised his voice back. And then the kid stormed off, and he tried to grab his arm to say, "Come back here, I'm trying to talk to you." Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. That I'm totally fine with. Because that's Tom Izzo. That's who Tom Izzo is, and I've always known that. And I guarantee you, Gabe Brown has always known that, and so has the family members that sent him to that school. This is the GSMC Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Kayvon Izami. Hope everyone's having an awesome weekend as we get ready to start a new week as we head into round 2 and then Sweet 16 of the NCAA tournament. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will talk some basketball on the court, what is happening with the brackets now, and what's going to happen in the NBA with the Lakers now that LeBron James has suffered a high ankle sprain. We'll get into it all after this.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, welcome back. This is the GSMC Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Kayvon Izami. Hope everyone is having an awesome day wherever you are, however you're listening, and whenever you're tuning into the show. We really do appreciate you making us a little bit part of your awesome day. And what a weekend. I mean, what a weekend of sports. Again, upset after upset after upset. Once again, the NCAA tournament lives up to the hype, to the unpredictability, and not one single bracket is still perfect. All brackets have now been defeated. They have not one person out there out of the 7 million brackets that were filled out, I think it was. Nobody has a perfect bracket anymore, and that's going to continue now that it looks like Syracuse, an 11 seed, is going to move on to the Sweet 16. They're up 4 right now against West Virginia with about 10 seconds left, and Buddy Boeheim, who has been an absolute stud, is going to shoot 2 free throws right now to put them up 6 most likely. So Jim Boeheim once again doing it, just bringing teams. He's got his son, Buddy Boeheim, has 22 points today. He went off in round 1 against San Diego State. And Jim Boeheim, when he gets into the tournament, look, he barely squeezes in every year, it feels like. But once he gets in, he wins games. And it's because of that zone. That zone is so hard to play against. If you're a 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old college kid, and you've never played against that zone before, it is really hard to adjust and learn how to infiltrate that type of zone in a span of 48 minutes. Remember, this isn't the NBA where you have 7 games to adjust possibly, right? That's why the NBA, you always see the best 2 teams, unless there's some crazy upset, are usually the 2 teams that are in the finals, right? That's almost always how it goes. The teams with the best players make the finals usually. Now, obviously, last year it was different in the bubble. Miami, they had some great players on their team, but they weren't the best team. But that was a different year, no fans, bubble. That really fit their type of young environment, right? That type of give it your all Miami Heat environment, that fit what they did. Their young stars didn't have as much pressure because there weren't fans. You weren't playing home and away, so that worked out. But if you go look back at the NBA and its history, majority of the time, if LeBron James is on your team, you're going to the finals. That's why he went to 10 straight finals. And most of the time, if you have 2 superstars on your team, like the Warriors did, and then 3 when they had Kevin Durant, you're going to the finals every single year because it's so hard to beat a team like that in the span of 7 games, right? You can beat them in 1. You can probably maybe even beat them in 2, but are you really going to beat them 4 times? No. But in college, it's beautiful because a 15 seed like Oral Roberts can go out there and jack up a bunch of threes in 1 game against Ohio State, and Ohio State can have an off night like they did, and Oral Roberts is moving on. Or a couple years ago, Virginia, and this right here is the definition of March Madness. Virginia, the number 1 seed in the entire tournament, loses to UMBC as the 16 seed. Right? They lose to UMBC, the first team ever to lose to a 16 seed, and then next year they come back and they win the entire thing. Like, that is the definition of the unpredictability of March Madness, and that's the secret sauce, guys. That's what makes it so fun. So it looks like, if all things hold up here, we'll have a double-digit seed head into the Sweet 16. Syracuse, they'll be taking on the winner of Houston and Rutgers. Rutgers is a 10 seed. Houston is a 2 seed. And that is going on. That game just started right now, so we'll see what happens there. But lots of fun things happening in the tournament, right? Gonzaga, 26-0. Can they be the first team to go undefeated since that Indiana team back in the 70s, which was coached by the legendary Bobby Knight, who we just talked about a little bit when we were talking about Tom Izzo. And talk about a tough-nosed coach. Bobby had his ways of coaching, and they were definitely different, and those type of ways probably would not get by in today's day because that was a little bit more aggressive than what is allowed now. It's just it would look down upon with the way not all of it. Look, tough coaching, is still 100% acceptable. Don't get this. I know we live in this culture now where a lot of things and people get canceled for just the most minimal things, and sometimes that's a problem, right? We don't want to get soft as a society. There's things that you do want to say, okay, enough is enough, and there's things where you need to say, whoa, this is too much, right? You don't need to cancel someone because they're being a tough coach, right? Now, it's if you're throwing a chair at them, if you're hitting them, that's different. That's too far. But it's when a kid is at Michigan State and he picks that team, sometimes a little tough coaching is what he wants. And Tom Izzo, I can guarantee you, is always doing what's in the best interest that he believes is for his kids. Now, he's not always going to be right. That's just how life is. But majority of the times, you don't get to being a Hall of Fame coach, a national champion coach, unless you have a good idea of how to coach your team the right way, and that's what he's doing. So, again, I have no problem with what Coach Izzo did at all. I want to change things up here as Syracuse is now 75-72, 2 seconds left. Buddy Boeheim misses that. Oh, my. 3-point game. Can he put it up? No good. Wait. I think he got fouled. Yeah, 0.2 seconds left, 75-72. That will be game over. Syracuse will win this game for sure. So that is it. Syracuse moves on to the Sweet 16. Another fantastic performance by Buddy Boeheim and by his father, head coach Jim Boeheim. And West Virginia is out. So for all you guys that had West Virginia going farther than the round of 32, I am sorry, but once again, another bracket buster. Hey, at least you don't have your champion out like I do. But I want to switch gears here to the NBA. And last night, yesterday actually, it was a 3:30 afternoon game, 3:30 Eastern time. The Los Angeles Lakers were playing against the Atlanta Hawks. Now, the Atlanta Hawks are on a winning streak right now. They fired their coach, Lloyd Pierce. Assistant coach Nate McMillan took over, Nate McMillan, by the way, is a fantastic coach. He just got fired last year by the Indiana Pacers, which I have no clue why they did that. And I think if you stuck some truth serum in the Indiana Pacers organization right now and asked them if they would take that firing back, I think they would probably tell you yes, because their team looks nowhere near as good this season as they're not even in the playoffs right now if the season ended. Nate McMillan is just a really, really good coach. And ever since Lloyd Pierce got fired, and I'm not saying the Hawks' issues were all on Lloyd Pierce. The players weren't playing very well. His message clearly got stale. There was rumors that they weren't listening to him. Nate McMillan has taken over. This team has clearly taken a jump in their step. They are clearly playing better basketball, and they're on a win streak right now. So this was a good game. And of course, unfortunately, it ended with a bad scenario that's going to be talked about a lot, and that is the LeBron James injury. Solomon Hill was going for a loose ball. Go and watch the video. A lot of people are saying it was a cheap shot. I honestly thought it was unnecessary. I didn't think that Solomon Hill needed to take that extra dive towards the ball when the ball was nowhere near him. I'm not going to say he did it on purpose or anything like that. I think that's ridiculous, but it just wasn't a normal loose ball play, in my opinion. So he rolled up on LeBron's ankle, and LeBron, he was in serious pain. Kyle Kuzma said he's never heard LeBron kind of scream before like that. He's never heard him in that much pain. And now LeBron's going to be out with a high ankle sprain indefinitely. Now listen, we don't know what indefinitely means. There's good news and there's bad news to this, okay? So for all you out there, let me give you the bad news first. The bad news is this. Right now, they don't have Anthony Davis either, right? Anthony Davis has a Achilles injury, and that is an injury that no no way are you rushing back, right? The dumbest thing you could do with an Achilles injury is rush back, because we all know what happened with Kevin Durant, right? Whenever you think of Achilles injuries, you think of Kevin Durant. The Warriors rushed him back. He wanted to come back, whatever. He came back too early. He popped his Achilles. And if that happens to Anthony Davis, the Lakers season, it's going to be really hard. Even with LeBron being fully healthy, it's going to be really hard to win a championship just because of how stacked the West is. And then if you get through the West, you're probably going to have to see a Brooklyn Nets team with Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden. So they need Anthony Davis. So they're being very cautious with him, which they were able to because they had LeBron James. And they have a record of 28-14, so they're tied for second place in the Western Conference. They're only 2 games behind the Utah Jazz, so they're only 2.5 games out of first place. And they've done this over the last 3 weeks now without Anthony Davis. So they've been comfortable in saying, look, we don't need to rush Anthony Davis back. We're winning. LeBron is doing great. Other players that would usually not get as much playing time because of Anthony Davis, they're getting more playing time. We're good. We'll just really work Anthony Davis back in when he's ready. And since he's already been on this team for a year, he'll be able to squeeze back in pretty nicely. It won't be a big adjustment period, so we believe. That's the Lakers' mindset, right? But now when you look at it, you've got a team that has in the past not performed well with LeBron James off the court. Now, he's only missed 1 game so far this season. They lost that game to the Sacramento Kings. But if you look at it just in terms of the span of the game, when LeBron James is off the court, the Los Angeles Lakers are negative in point differential. They do not do very well with him off the court. So the issue is, how long will LeBron be out, and what does that? How far will this Lakers team slide in the standings? Because this West is tough, right? If the Lakers start falling down to think about it. The difference between being in third place right now, they're tied for second with the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns have the tiebreaker, so they're in second. The Lakers are in third. The difference between third and sixth is 2 games. 2 games, that's it, with the difference between them at number 3 and the Denver Nuggets at number 6. The Lakers are 28-14, the Nuggets are 25-17. So if you go on a 4 or 5 game losing streak, you can easily drop down to 6th, 7th place in the West, and then you're talking about having to play a team like the Phoenix Suns or the Los Angeles Clippers or the Utah Jazz in the first round of the playoffs, which is a very tough task. Now, listen, that's the bad news, right? The bad news is that. The bad news is, what is this going to do for the team? How far are they going to slide? And then, of course, what does this mean for the future? I mean, the really bad news is that's the bad news in the moment. The really bad news is this going to affect LeBron in the long run? Like, when he comes back, is he going to be 100%? Is he going to be able to play the MVP-style basketball he was playing before he got hurt? Or could this be a lingering issue that hurts him for the rest of the season? So that's the bad news, right? The good news is they're in third place. They have wiggle room. And it gives the team, the young players like Talon Horton-Tucker, Kyle Kuzma, Alex Caruso, Montrezl Harrell, Dennis Schroeder, it gives those guys more playing time. It gives them more responsibility. When you have more responsibility, you learn more, right? You become a better player in most cases. So the good news is these guys are going to get their time to work on their craft more, become a better player, so that when LeBron and AD do come back, they'll be even more prepared for the playoff run. That's the good news. That's how I would look at it if I'm the Lakers organization. The other good news is this isn't LeBron's landing foot, right? When he goes and takes a jump shot, he doesn't land on this foot. So that is another really good news is think about it. If you have a high ankle sprain and you get back into the groove and you're constantly landing on that foot with your jump shots, that could be put you in a real easy situation to tweak that ankle sprain again. But the fact that he won't be landing on it often could help him more, right? It's another minor positive, optimistic way to look at it, in my opinion. So those are kind of the pros and cons. Now, the question becomes, what is the Los Angeles Lakers going to do moving forward? The trade deadline is coming up. It's in a couple of days. Are they going to make a big splash now? Are they going to do something to get a type of guard play, someone who can score the ball now that LeBron's off the court? Because this has always been the issue with this Lakers team. They don't have enough players who can put the ball on the floor and go score. The team is set up, and rightfully so, for a couple of guys like Dennis Schroeder and LeBron, who can and Caruso at times, who can go out, and Kuzma at times, and get their own bucket. Everyone else is set up for the kick-out pass by LeBron, put down low to go in the post, where they're a catch-and-shoot situation or a one-pass dribble move situation. They're not going to go, hey, here's the ball, go score, right? Because they have LeBron doing that for them. And there's those other guys that I just named. So now would this make the Lakers more inclined to go out and try and get another scorer? Or are they hoping to just get Andre Drummond, the big man, because they have had issues down low, if he gets balled out? These are the questions now that I have for the Lakers organization and general manager Rob Pelinka. And those are things that we're going to learn very shortly with the trade deadline coming up. This is the GSMC Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Kayvon Izami. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back to finish off the show with segment number 4, we'll talk a little bit more about the Lakers news, and then we'll dive into a little bit more on NBA, and then we'll finish it up with NFL free agency. Don't go anywhere. This is the GSMC Sports Podcast. We'll be right back after this.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome. This is the GSMC Sports Podcast. This is segment number 4. Segment number 4, the GSMC Sports Podcast, is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kayvon Izami. Hope everyone's having an awesome day. Can't wait to see how things go throughout the week here. Talk to you guys more as we go, because we're in a great time with the sports world as the March Madness tournament is officially underway. We know that. Why? Because upsets are happening left and right. Upset galore, upset central, whatever you want to call it. It is happening, and it's been happening even more today, as we've had 3 teams so far make the Sweet 16 today. 3 teams total make the Sweet 16, and one of them is an 8 seed beating a 1 seed. The other one is an 11 seed beating a 3 seed, and the other one is a 1 seed in Baylor. So really only one of those was supposed to happen. West Virginia, the 3 seed, goes down. Illinois, the 1 seed, goes down. And I'll tell you what, the Big Ten has had some issues so far in the tournament. We always try and compare these conferences, and the Big Ten has, without a doubt, been the best conference this year. They're not showing that in this tournament so far. They have had some pretty disappointing performances with Illinois, who won their tournament and was number one, won their tournament, was number 2 in the conference all year behind Michigan. They lost in the, a lot of people picked them to win it all. They just lost today in the second round. You had Purdue, who was the number 4 seed, lose to North Texas in the first round. You had Ohio State, who was number 2 seed, lose to Oral Roberts in the second round. It's been tough sledding for the Big Ten. Now, there's been some victories as well. Michigan, they won their first round game. It was against 16 seed. They play LSU tomorrow, and I'll tell you what, that is not going to be an easy game. That is going to be a tough game for them. So we'll see if they can keep it rolling. Maryland beat UConn, so that's good. But when you look at it, Wisconsin, they just lost to Baylor. So the Big Ten is hanging on by a thread here, hoping that Michigan can keep on rolling and Maryland can maybe have a big upset against Alabama tomorrow. So we'll see what happens there. But the Pac-12, it's funny, right? All year we talked great about the Big Ten, and we said how the Pac-12 was kind of overrated, right? Not that many good teams, and the Pac-12 entering today is undefeated in the tournament. They haven't lost a game. UCLA wins a big game against Michigan State, the 4-in, right? They win that game to get into the tournament, and then as an 11 seed, they upset BYU to have a possible now they have a matchup against Abilene Christian, who upset Texas. So they have a really good chance to make the Sweet 16. You have Oregon, which, by the way, that game, what happened with Oregon was really unfortunate for VCU. If you guys haven't heard this, VCU had to forfeit, and we talked about could this happen, right? And because they're not in a legit bubble, we said it might, and it happened. VCU had a couple of positive tests, and they had to forfeit, and it sucks. I'm heartbroken for those kids and the coaches, especially the kids. They worked so hard to get there, and you don't even get to play the game, and Oregon just gets to go through. It sucks, right? But that's the risk of what happened, what this tournament is, and luckily so far that's been the only issue. Let's keep praying that that's the only issue that happens, the only bad thing that happens. But that's something we really need to pay attention to. So Oregon got lucky; they got to kind of squeeze on through there. Other than that, they had USC. USC beat Drake in the first round. USC looked really good in that game. So the Pac-12 is undefeated right now. And then Oregon State, of course, how could I forget Oregon State, the 12 seed, upsetting Tennessee, the 5 seed, by double-digit victory. And then now they take on Cade Cunningham and Oklahoma State in the round of 32, which starts I think about 9-10 Eastern time. So we'll see how that goes. But it's been a fabulous tournament. It's been an awesome tournament, lots of fun. Arkansas is up against Texas Tech, 48-40 right now. I have Arkansas going to the Final Four. My bracket's done because of Illinois. I was in first place in every single group that I was in until Illinois lost. Now I'm still in first place, but there's no chance I can win it because my possible points are extremely low because I lost my champion. So that sucks, but it is what it is, and that's the fun of the NCAA tournament. Now, we were talking about the Los Angeles Lakers. One other part of this conversation, and this is not as big because what's more important is the team success and how the Lakers do in the playoffs and can they get back to the finals, can they win it all, etc. That's not as important as the MVP conversation which at this moment LeBron James was winning the MVP. He was the number one player for MVP. Joel Embiid was right there, but Embiid got hurt as well. But Embiid's injury, he'll be out a couple of weeks. So LeBron's had a couple of strong games, and he jumped back to first place in that conversation. Now, what does this do? It depends. How long will LeBron be out? Look, usually a high ankle sprain, these players are out for anywhere from 8, 9, 10, 11 games. It could be 2 weeks. Now, we've seen LeBron be unhuman at times where he might come back a little bit earlier. It just depends on what the Lakers want to do and what LeBron wants to do, of course. Does he want to rush back into it? Does he want to try and force it back? Or does he feel comfortable enough to come back? Again, it's not his landing foot, which is good. He won't land on that foot when he takes jump shots, which is good, but also it's an unfamiliar territory with LeBron not having this injury before, so he might not know how to react to it moving forward with his body. So that's something we have to watch in terms of the MVP, and it gives guys like Nikola Jokic, who's had a fantastic season for Denver, it gives him a chance to kind of make up ground and possibly take the lead in the conversation. James Harden, who has had an awesome season, but the thing with him is he started out on Houston and then got traded to Brooklyn. It's hard to win the MVP when you didn't start out on that team. He still could now that Embiid's injured and LeBron's injured, depending on how long those two are out. If no one else steps up and Jokic doesn't take control, Harden might be the only one to give it to. We'll see. But that's another conversation to look at as we move forward. But my thoughts and prayers are with LeBron, and I hope he gets back sooner than later. That's for sure. You guys know I love me some LeBron James. This is the GSMC Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Kayvon Izami. I want to change the conversation here to the gridiron and jump on over to the NFL. While obviously, the first part of the week, I told you guys how it's going to be all NFL come Thursday, Friday. That conversation's really going to change to basketball, to NCAA March Madness, and that's what's happened with all of these games. But there still has been some signings that have happened that we need to talk about. And one of them that I'm really shocked about is Mitchell Trubisky going to sign with the Buffalo Bills. This one is a big head scratcher to me. It's an awesome signing for Buffalo. I mean, this is a tremendous signing. They have a quarterback in Josh Allen who probably any minute now is going to sign like a $200 million contract extension because he's been outstanding of a quarterback. And they have their franchise guys. So this isn't like they signed Mitchell Trubisky to compete with Josh Allen or anything like that. No, they signed him because now they have the best backup in the NFL. If something happens to Josh Allen, which we hope not, and the Buffalo Bills also hope that they never see Mitchell Trubisky take the field, but if something was to happen, they would feel comfortable bringing Trubisky out there for a couple of games until Allen was healthy or whatever the situation was, right? Because we have to remember, Mitchell Trubisky, while he didn't live up to the number 2 overall draft pick, he still has a winning record as an NFL starting quarterback. In 4 seasons with Chicago, he went a total of 29-21. And remember, one of those seasons, he came in after the first 5 games of his rookie year and went 4-8. So obviously that was his rookie year. The next year he went 11-3 and took the Bears to the playoffs. Then he went 8-7 after that, and then in 2020 he went 6-3 and took the Bears to the playoffs again. So he's only had 1 losing record in a season. He's only had 1 season with a losing record, and that was his rookie year. So let's remember, yes, Mitchell Trubisky, he wasn't good in terms of that number 2 overall draft pick. In terms of the value where they drafted him, he didn't live up to it. But he's still 29-21 as a starting quarterback in the NFL is really good. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Those Chicago Bear teams were pretty good. They had some of the best defense in the league. Not very good turnovers, though. I mean, not very good weapons for Mitchell Trubisky to throw to, but they had really good defense. So this is an awesome signing for Buffalo because they look at it and say this: our team is stacked. Our roster is great. Mitchell Trubisky, when he has a good roster and a good coach, he's done pretty well. So if, God forbid, something happens to Josh Allen and he has to come in with this roster, with Brian Daboll as his offensive coordinator, who is going to do wonders for him because he's such a good offensive coordinator, and look what he did for Josh Allen, we feel okay. So this is a massive win for the Buffalo Bills. But this is a huge head scratcher for Mitchell Trubisky. For all of those things that I just said could go to the reason of why would he sign with them? Why would he not go and sign with a team where he has a chance to get on the field, a chance to actually see the field, a chance to compete for the job, aka Buffalo, aka Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Eagles, or the Washington football team, or there's the Denver Broncos. There are so many teams, or Houston Texans if Deshaun Watson ends up getting traded. I mean, there's the Carolina Panthers, right? Go be backup quarterback. The Atlanta Falcons. Matt Ryan is clearly the starter, but hey, how much longer is he going to play? 2, 3, 4 more years? You can learn from Matt Ryan, right? I mean, I don't understand. It was only a 1-year deal for very minimum money. So it just begs the question, was there no one else offering him anything? And if so, why? Why would Washington not bring him in? Why would Philadelphia not bring him in? It makes total sense to bring him in. Now, Philadelphia, they have a really bad roster, so he probably wouldn't be able to succeed there. But Washington has an awesome roster. They have I could argue that they have just as good, if not better, of a roster than Chicago did when they went 11-3. Their defense is amazing. Their defensive line is probably the best in the league. They have more weapons than Chicago had that year with guys like Terry McLaurin and now Curtis Samuel, the awesome running back Gibson. So to me, it's a head scratcher on both ends. It's a head scratcher why Mitchell Trubisky wouldn't look for more opportunity, or why other teams weren't willing to offer more opportunity. It's kind of like, to me, the Marcus Mariota thing of last year. Like, Marcus Mariota went and signed as a backup quarterback for the Raiders. And right now, hopefully he's going to go into free agency because the reports are the Raiders want him to take a pay cut. And if he doesn't, they're gonna cut him. So if he does get cut, last year when he was a free agent, I was saying go sign with Chicago. And if he gets cut now, Chicago would be stupid to not go and sign Marcus Mariota instead of having Andy Dalton and Nick Foles compete for the job. Philadelphia, go sign Mariota. Carolina with Teddy Bridgewater, same style of quarterback. Go sign Mariota. So those are my questions. These guys can still play football. While they might not be the best in the league, and they might not have lived up to their draft position and the value, they're still good quarterbacks that have taken their teams to the playoffs in both Trubisky and Mariota and have winning records as a starting quarterback in the league, which is extremely hard to do. Very hard to do. So I'm puzzled by Mariota picking, by Mitchell Trubisky picking the Bills, but maybe that's the only place he had offered to him, which also is really puzzling to me as well, right? This is a guy who, again, while he wasn't great, he did show that when you have a good roster around him, when you put a good roster and a good coaching staff around him, he can win some football games. And now Buffalo will have the best backup situation in the league if, God forbid, something happens to Josh Allen. So that's one thing. And before we close out the show here, I want to talk about one other quarterback situation, and that's Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles. Howie Roseman, general manager, who I've been very tough on because I think I'm just shocked the moves that he has made. They make zero sense to me, but that's here or there. He came out and talked the other day to the media and said how obviously we're going to sign another quarterback. We can't have just one quarterback on the roster, yada, yada, which he's right about, right? You can't go into the season with only one quarterback on the roster. So my question becomes, who are they going to sign? And will it be a rookie? Will they end up drafting a rookie? Which I think would be dumb, okay? And this is why. They just went through this whole process with Carson Wentz. the reason why Carson Wentz is not an Eagle anymore is for numerous reasons, but one in particular is he lost trust in them. He didn't feel like they were loyal to him. Why? Because they never, other than giving him money, which I understand, a lot of people think that shows everything, but I think you have to expand your mind a little bit these days. There's more to it than just that. And they went and they brought in Nick Foles, and then when he got hurt, Nick Foles won the Super Bowl, they put up a statue right away of him. Then Carson Wentz gets over that, and they go and draft, literally after he has a great year, takes him to the playoff, and they could use a second-round pick to build their team more. What do? They go and draft Jalen Hurts, a quarterback. So now you're telling me you just went through this whole situation and you're going to do the same thing to Jalen Hurts that you're going to do to Carson Wentz? That makes no sense, especially because this roster's not good. You have a rookie head coach, first-time ever head coach, a young quarterback in Jalen Hurts with a terrible roster. Philadelphia is not winning a lot of games this year. They're just not. There is no possible way, whether they have Jalen Hurts under center, whether they have a rookie quarterback under center. It's just not happening. So why not see what you have in Jalen Hurts? Why not? Why not see what you have in this young quarterback? Not in terms of wins and losses, because unless he becomes like some outstanding player out of nowhere, which he could be, but again, this is a bad roster. So why not see what he has with your mechanics? What can he do with this type of roster? Can he build this roster up and maybe get 6, 7, 8 wins out of this roster, which would be so impressive? Or because the roster's so bad, does he only get 3, 4, 5 wins, which tells you something about him, right? It tells you, okay, he might be more of a quarterback like a Jared Goff, who needs a lot of help around him, like a Mitchell Trubisky, who needs a lot of help around him. Or could he be like a Joe Burrow, who was showing that he could put up stats and wins last year with not a lot of pieces around him before he got hurt? Justin Herbert, yes, he had a lot of pieces around him, but he was a rookie and still performed enough to get wins, right? Like Patrick Mahomes still had a great team around him, but he was able to win games. You know, Hurts is not going to have a great team around him, but can he still lift up these players to make them better than they are? And if he can, then you know you've hit on your quarterback. If he can't, then you draft one next year. It's that simple. Why draft one this year, and then you don't know what you have in Hurts, you don't know what you have in this rookie, and it's all a mess again. And you're going through this entire situation again. The best bet for Philadelphia was to bring in a Ryan Fitzpatrick, was to bring in an Andy Dalton. Now that those are gone, I don't bring in some veteran quarterback. Maybe bring Nick Foles back. I don't know. See what you have in Jalen Hurts. That, in my opinion, is the best possible thing the Philadelphia Eagles could do. All right, thank you, everyone. Awesome show today. Really was a great show. It flew by. I feel like I was watching games the whole time while talking. Hopefully, I didn't seem too distracted, but it's March Madness, baby. Let's go. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show, write a nice review. That really helps us out. Also, if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, guys. Have a great night. Have a great start to your week, and we will talk to you again on Wednesday. Figure out more of what's going on with this March Madness thing, update everyone's bracket, talk more NFL, talk more about the LeBron situation. Have a great week. We'll talk to you again soon.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.